So, in this video, we're going to talk about the information industry and how it's really the business model for fake news. So, the best way to really find out about business and corporations and um, if they're ethical or not is really just to follow the money. And this is really how misinformation and disinformation has been able to thrive in recent years. So let's take a look at the information industry. Now, none of this is nefarious or anything like that. We're just going to look at some of the massive amount of money that goes through just a handful of companies that can really affect the information that we take in and how it can really lead to fake news and how it's a really great business model for social media to thrive in. So these are some of the main sub areas of the information industry. No surprise, we have some of the more technical areas, film production, broadcasting, and this also includes print, in person, uh, you know, entertainment that eventually gets recorded, telecommunications, software. So it's a really broad. We're going to look at it in the most broad information in its most broadest sense in terms of industry. And this is just a flow chart of different what affects the industry as a whole. So we can really kind of see how the money flows and what matters the most in the information industry and who ends up supplying it and who ends up purchasing out of the information industry as a whole. No surprise, college and universities would be a major purchaser, public administration, so government has a lot to do with information, any type of banking, hospitals, healthcare. So it's really just a really broad industry that we're looking at. But as broad as it is, there's just a few areas that really dominate the biggest chunks of it. So telecommunications, software, data publishing, and web publishing. So that can include a whole different categories like blogs, any any business or person that has a website. What I think is really interesting to see how print publishing, so print news and books and all of those um, forms of information is now just such a small portion of this industry, but um, they all make up $1.9 trillion. And one thing I wanted to point out, which is going to be a big um, uh, link to why fake news is so prevalent, is advertising. Advertisers have a quarter of the $1.9 trillion industry. So that is a lot of money that advertising and what they are disseminating throughout the entire industry as a whole. So the major players, I was actually really surprised to hear AT&T was one of the biggest players, but none of these are huge surprises. That Alphabet Inc. is Google, um, Microsoft, and Comcast. Comcast is not just internet providing, but they own NBC and I think there's another television company that they own. So they own a huge segment of news and entertainment. And this is just a little Google in a little bit more specifics in just how much revenue they generate from different parts of the industry. I won't go over that for time's sake, but if you're interested in looking more into them, there's a lot of content there. And then it really shows you Alphabet Inc. and where their hands are in the information industry. None of it's shocking, but when you see the total revenue, how many people they employ, and then really how much content they are facilitating between people and creators, it's just a really good point to keep in mind because a lot of the content we're absorbing is Google has. or Alphabet Inc., one of their companies has had a part in it getting to us. And their profit margin is 27%. So intake versus how much they have to spend, a quarter of it goes to just sheer profit. So that's a lot of money that they take in. So, internet publishing and broadcasting. This is more of where fake news is going to fall into getting to us, but it's everything, pretty much all our entertainment that we do online, and if we're creators of information, so ebook, reading and publishing, online news, social media, all that kind of stuff falls into this part of the general information industry. One thing I wanted to point out was ad driven content is one of the major product and services of this part of the industry. So, ad driven content and advertising is a huge element of the information industry. Internet publishing alone pulls in 227 billion dollars, and that's a lot of growth and projected growth for the future. And where most of the money comes from and generated is by internet traffic. Um, that drives the most amount of money coming and going. So internet traffic means you and me. Um, Anything that we do online, regardless if it's searching or social media or where you're online, looking at this video right now, that all falls into internet traffic. And so the major players of the internet publishing, Facebook, no surprise, and they own a huge chunk. That's a lot of money that they um, piece of the pie that they have. Again, Alphabet Inc., Netflix, Apple, and other. The big chunk labeled other. That's lots of different small companies that have tiny slivers of the pie. But again, ad driven content is um, the key product and service of this part of the information industry. And this is just another look at the products and services percentages. Search engines. So this part of the information industry is $114 billion. And so key drivers of search engines. None of this is really any surprise, but um, it kind of shows you in detail on how the money is flowing within this part of the industry and who is supplying it and who's consuming it, and um, what affects the price and of internet, just getting internet. Um, if the more consumers spend, the more revenue is generated, the more companies are able to provide different services. So it's just interesting to look at how the profits and money flows within it. So then, no surprise, Alphabet Inc., which is Google, it owns the largest share of it, and that's a lot of billions of dollars that they own in this segment. And their major revenue for search engines is all related to advertising. So, and with advertising comes trying to sell you something. So it could be not just you and me; it could be uh, another business they're trying to sell to, but it's all content trying to generate money to create content that makes you want to buy something. Um, so social media, I'm not really going to get into that. For a few reasons. Um, as far as where the money flows to and from, we can see really Facebook owns the biggest sliver of the pie when it comes to internet publishing. It's actually really difficult to measure. There's a ton of different small players, different factors. There's private versus public companies. Um, There's anonymity on the internet. So while there's a lot of known people on social media, there's probably a lot more, probably 10 times more that are anonymous and we don't know. And a lot of websites actually you can mask to protect privacy. And there's whole services that will help you um, when you purchase a domain. You don't have to put your address. They let you put their address, and it's completely legal to do that. You might even own a, a domain that you've done it with. So another thing to consider is control of the media. So we can see that really only a few companies own significant stakes in the market. Um, so control of the market can seep in, but um, it's important to consider about when this few companies have a stake in um, such a large stake in the industry. It can really lead to censorship and deciding who sees what and what gets to whose um, you know uh, set of eyes. Um, so and it's obviously it's not discriminatory in a direct sense, but really in an indirect sense. So they can target people that spend a certain amount of money, so they're targeting a certain amount of um, a socioeconomic class. So just really important to consider that when only a few major players own the largest stakes of these industries, it can lead to slightly discriminatory practices, regardless if it's indirect. So just something to note. And these are some of the uh, factors that drive um, some of the internet sales and I'm sorry, social media sales and content. So it's important to realize when looking at the information industry that really there's only a handful of companies that have significant stakes in the market. And when only a few companies own large portions of the information industry, um, censorship can seep in indirectly through socioeconomic situations. Let's go back to the first in the general um, financials of the information industry. What was one of the driving factors? Households earning more than $100,000. Now, a lot of these advertisers can target households with their ads that only make $100,000 or more. So it prevents households that make less than that from seeing their product. It could be for a variety of reasons. Maybe they can't afford their product, but it could also lead to different discriminatory practices. So um, we want to keep that in mind as we kind of see how just a handful of these companies own huge stakes in the information industry. So now we're going to look at news syndication. Um, and the news syndication is a service that news agencies provide in addition to doing their own reporting. A lot of local newspapers, even larger ones, they don't have the staffing to cover every story out there. They they can't, send people to every city to cover events that maybe not aren't generating as much interest. So a lot of times, what they'll do and is get content from companies that do have the staffing and cover lots of different stories all over the country. And basically, news syndication is the process of news automatically publishing from one site to another. And this is totally legitimate. And you've probably heard of a lot of these companies that are the top news syndicators, AP, Associated Press, Axios, and Thomson Reuters. And they're actually viewed as some of the most center, um, as in terms of media bias, news agencies out there. Basically, they're just reporting the who, what, when, and where um, of current events. So when a newspaper, even newspapers like the New York Times, they want to publish a story or they need filler content, often they'll subscribe to these news syndicator companies and publish stories from there to fill their newspaper spots. We can see in the Atlanta Journal Constitution, which is fairly large paper. They have news syndicates all the time. So if you want to know if a story is syndicated, um, it will tell you right below the byline that it is from AP, Reuters, Axios. And as I mentioned earlier, the New York Times even does that. And we can see the byline, um, from AP. And this might have been an important story that they wanted to feature, but there's only so many reporters that they can send all over the place to cover these events or people speaking. Um, so they'll get it from another source. So this is the overall flow chart. We talked about a lot of different segments of the information industry and how they kind of flow into one another. So this is it as a larger whole. Um, so we have the information industry in the center. They branch out into the main segments that we talked about, and then the smaller sub um, industries within those. So you can kind of just have an aerial view of everything that we just talked about because I threw a lot of numbers at you. So, why does this even matter? Why are we learning this? Well, it's important to take a general look at the information and how it's structured to know the major companies that are involved and to really understand how massive the size of the industry is. And when we understand how the business of information in general works, we can really begin to see how fake news will thrive in this business model. So that is all for this topic. We will go into social media and fake news in the next one. I will see you there. Bye.